name is Maria Redman. I serve as the Director of the Office of Sustainability and Clean Energy for the state of Wisconsin. I have the great privilege of working with Governor Evers' administration on all things sustainability and clean energy for the state. And a few years ago, he issued Executive Order 38 and really brought back and prioritized climate change, sustainability, and clean energy, and really asked us to work with our local leaders to ensure that we're creating action and momentum in order to reduce the impacts of climate change and also move our state towards 100% carbon-free electricity consumed by 2050. So if you're not energized by what we just heard from our local leaders in Dane County and the city of Madison, I am so excited to introduce our next panel of leaders who are really on the ground doing the work and making things happen, and hope that you're inspired to ask more questions and to learn more about what they're working on. So we have Cedric Hodo he's the Chief of Operations and Executive Director of Building and Auxiliary Services at the Madison Metropolitan School District. And I thank you for your work. I have three kids in the school district, so I'm sure that's a challenge at times. Delaney Gobster, Sustainability Director at Little John's Restaurant, and Pio, who has my now favorite title, Chief Beer Officer at Delta Beer Lab. So what we're going to do today is we're going to really dig into your sustainability efforts and your clean energy efforts and all of the above, and really learn about what you're doing and the challenges. And you all are local leaders. You are working hard, building holistic sustainability efforts, healthy environment, equity, workforce development. It really encompasses everything that our administration is wanting to support and create momentum behind, but like the work that you're doing is so important. So I want to stop talking because I want to give you the floor to be able to introduce yourself and give us a little background on what you're working on and what excites you the most.
Good morning. I'm Pio, Chief Beer Officer at Delta Beer Lab, representing small businesses and the work that you can do with vision. We opened our doors in February 2019, and even in the business plan stage, the first paragraph of our business plan was our mission, and we've not changed it. We've not changed our methods either. Our mission is to expand community through quality local craft beer without barriers to gender, race, or sexual orientation. So not a lot of that sounds like making beer. But a lot of it has to do with the consumption of beer and the development of it. The industry that I work in is community. The people that we bring through our doors are community. The places, the local watering holes you go to are community. And so every piece of our mission has to do with making beer. But it's also so much more. That's probably pretty good. Go ahead.
I'm Delaney Gobster. I work with Little John's Restaurant as our sustainability director. So as a restaurant, we are a nonprofit that's just a little bit over 2 years old. And we source food excess, so food before it hits the point of being food waste. So collaborating with our sourcing partners, whether those be farmers, so direct producers, other retailers, distributors, to reduce their barriers to moving food excess that they personally cannot sell or distribute. And then we, as our core competency, process that into meals that we provide back to our community at sliding scale rates or through our Pay What You Can restaurant. And then I also work with the university, so UW-Madison, and I teach a course this spring that is focused on the research around how do we engage with our community and empower the work that's already being done, connect those voices and those resources to then re-empower and reinvest resources into our community and make sure that, A, we're reducing waste where we can and using those resources as best as we can, then to connect those to those in need. As the pandemic really spurred a lot of our work. We were initially just a cafe and food truck idea that Chef Dave Heidi then really spurred into action throughout the pandemic. We partnered with Reach Dane right at the beginning and were able to get 34,000 meals over the course of 4 weeks into Reach Dane, the Head Start program for the county, just because of all of the supply chain gaps, both on the food sourcing side, so plenty of producers, as You don't even have to work in the food sector to know all of the milk dumping, the meat processing facilities that went out, and all of those gaps of getting perfectly good, high-quality product into the mouths of those who need it. Because on one hand, there was milk dumping, and on the other hand, SNAP rates and food pantries were having lines that they could not accommodate. So just connecting those gaps, and as we saw as our keynote speaker, acting as a weaver to connect the resources in our community.
All right, thank you, Delaney. Cedric Hodo, Chief Operation Officer and Senior Executive Director of Building Services for the Metropolitan Madison School District. I wish I was the Chief Beer Officer sometimes working in the school district, but unfortunately, we can't, maybe weekends, maybe. My role is a dual part. I oversee all logistics and operations within the Madison Public School District. That's inclusive of busing, transportation, food service, referendum, historic referendum. Kudos to the Madison community for giving the school district that referendum, as well as safety, security, buildings and grounds, pretty much all operations. One of the significant pieces I think that's very critical for us as we try to navigate through a pandemic, the impact on kids, their personal growth, their space, their dimensions, are they learning? What has been the impact on them? And so part of what we're really focused on is how do we impact kids at the highest level? We serve about 40,000 meals a day to our kids. We're transporting 20+ thousand kids logistically from start to finish in the midst of not just a busing pandemic, but a busing shortage. Supply chain shortages. So we have huge problems, and so our goal is to work collaboratively with our community partners, work with our parents, work with our communities, work with our school board to find a way in which our kids can begin to navigate through this time period and come out of it with a level of ease and efficiency where they use this as a growing opportunity. And so we're excited about Sustain Dane, and I'm excited to be here, and I want to thank Claire and the entire team. I want to thank the community for the opportunity to share what we're doing at MMSD.
Thank you all. Before we start, I just want to point out on your tables you have a little piece of paper that has a phone number. And as we are talking up here and having a discussion and highlighting the great work, if you have a question that pops up, why don't you just text that? And actually, it'll come right to my phone. And I can incorporate that, your question, into some of the discussion points. And if we don't get to your question, we plan to follow up afterwards. So feel free to text me. I am not scrolling the gram up here. I am looking at your questions and trying to incorporate them the best that I can. But yeah, please, and we'll hopefully squeeze in a few questions at the end too. But seeing that we're short on time, if you do have a question, feel free to text me. So I think you're probably working on a lot of projects right now. What project excites you the most in your work that you're doing? If you could highlight one thing that you're doing that gets you up in the morning and gets you super excited, what would that be? And you don't have to go in order. So if someone feels motivated to go first, go for it.
Oh, I'll certainly have a lot to keep me busy, definitely. But I think the most important one for me, which I've been laser focused on, is really the referendum. The referendum was a $317 million referendum passed by the city to impact our high schools. It really was for all intents and purposes, a mechanical upgrade. When we look at ease and efficiency and personal growth, just like we're sitting in this room and it's very comfortable, picture if it was 90 degrees or 93 degrees. How would you learn in that climate? On the other side, picture if it was 30 degrees, it's too cold. And so these mechanical upgrades are very important to us. One of the key things that we're doing is converting our old boilers from 1930 and 40, in which we're holding together, into geothermal boilers. The geothermal system will be much more economical, much more efficient, and will allow for heating and cooling to be done in a much more efficient way. That's very critical for us. As we also go through this design phase, and as you're starting to see a lot of MMSD buildings, particularly the high schools, you see massive construction going on right now. So my team oversees that with support of Findorf, who's the construction project managers. But those projects are going to be very important for our learners over the next 3 years, all the way until 2024. I think we will conclude. You will see a huge impact at the high school level. Beautiful designs, comfortable ergonomic seatings, new furniture, new spaces, new technology, faster Wi-Fi. All of these things affect sustainability of kids. And how do you support them, and how do they grow? And so for me, that's project number one. We want to land this plane in 2024, and we want to turn the schools back over to the community, showing that we appreciate your support and your hard-earned dollars and what you've done to help us get there. But it is a much-needed referendum. Our schools were built in the 1800s, in some of them, and as you can imagine, we need some upgrades at this point. So that keeps me up.
The thing that we're looking at for 2023 is building connections. We work with a lot of nonprofit partners, probably since our conception, close to 40, and I'll explain that later on. But one thing that we haven't been very good at is maintaining contact, maintaining the connections, the reasons that brought us together, so that we can, in the future, make each other stronger. So all the different partners that we've worked with that are directly tied to our mission have a lot to offer the community, do offer a lot to the community, and we're going to be looking at strategic ways to reconnect the leaders of those organizations so that we can build a stronger network.
For 2023, on our sourcing team, one of our biggest projects that we're building out right now is our sliding scale purchasing program. So this past summer, we've been working with local producers to start a gleaning program and sustainable disposal programs where we would send volunteers to farms that had labor barriers to taking excess from their field of items that they either quantity-wise didn't have a market for, or just quality-wise, they were more B grade, ones with blemishes, imperfect produce that most of you might be familiar with. So we've been piloting that program just to get food in the doors, to also then process into meals, to then donate out the doors. But something that we're seeing that we anticipated as a barrier initially, just didn't have the resources at the time to build that as a program, is how do we support our local producers and compensate them for the wonderful quality produce that they're donating to us. Don't want to just donate in, and obviously we still want to donate out as much as possible, but we hit seasonal fluctuations that are really hard to overcome if it's just a donation basis, where you'll get 3 pallets of tomatoes one week, and we had a donation of a literal ton of cabbage the next, which is wonderful, but having a balanced meal and menu for our customers based off of that can be very challenging. So we're looking to plug those gaps of our seasonal variation by not just taking what everyone has at their peak, but also trying to work with our community partners on a more mutual aid basis, where we have Anderson Park Community Farm that donates to other food pantries as well, and so we share our storage space occasionally with them, where they can house some of their squash as it's being cave stored, and then they'll donate back to us as well. So sliding scale, both in more of an in-kind way, where it's, shared storage and transportation. If we're going all the way out to Baraboo to pick up some donations from a local producer, we can then also, we know we're not going to use 10 pallets worth of, tomatoes or chickpeas or brown rice right in the moment. So then we redistribute out what we can, but working more on a mutual aid basis with our producers to provide more support for them as donors to us, and to see how that can empower our community and both of our works on either end.
Excellent. We are getting so many questions via the text. I love this. I'm like, which question do I choose? So how about, what do you see your role, and this specifically for P.O. and Delaney, what do you see your role as in innovation and maximizing social change?
We take the approach of that businesses can and should do well and do good at the same time. And what I mean by that is, you can't do the good works, you can't live your mission if you don't exist, so you have to do well. And we are working on overcoming that challenge. But having the mindset in all the things that you do to also do good, and finding a balance in what motivates you, your organization, your shareholders, your community partners to do good within your work structure.
On our end, we innovate really by trying to identify our community gaps and our food systems gaps and food supply chain gaps. A lot of that comes directly from our community partners and the barriers and obstacles they voice of their work, but a lot of that, honestly, is just, as has been spoken to today, all of the sustainability gaps that are throughout our nation of we really identified as our core mission, food excess and access. Trying to enunciate on that. It blurs the line occasionally, but where there is a lot of product that's not getting to those in need, and what we really identified was processing. So we have a wonderful food community here in Dane County, a lot of incredible producers, a lot of incredible food service providers, but where it gets to the minimal processing of produce is really where we don't have a lot of infrastructure built around locally or nationally. Post-Green Revolution, a lot of that industrialized and commodified, and we really don't have the community infrastructure for mid-scale processing, I would say. A lot of that was evident in the pandemic, where you had scale and format issues where restaurants shut down, and so all of the larger scale format product could not go directly to pantries, where a number 10 can that's this large or a squash that's this large is not great for a single mother with multiple jobs and multiple kids to just crack open at night. So we've really been spurred by the needs of our community and the gaps that we see in our food supply chain, and have tried to fill those gaps, and a lot of those have systemic reasons why they're needs in the first place, and so just learning from those around us and trying to support the work that's already being done in our community is how we try to innovate and collaborate with others.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I'm going to take a different direction with you, Cedric. So what are some of the resources that I'm getting a lot of questions about budget and resources and things like that. So what are some of the resources that you've tapped into for your sustainability efforts?
Yeah, I mean, a wonderful question. I can think of one right off the back. I want to personally thank Claire and at Sustain Dane, her and Chris, for supporting the educational aspect of recycling. Taking our kids at an early age, showing them how to recycle and the purpose of recycling, putting together videos that support learning, and then partnering with us to create what is needed to sustain that across all of the schools, I thought was very critical. We're in our beginning stages of education around with a certain pilot number of schools, and beginning the process of waste reduction. And so that's very critical to us for central office concept, a central kitchen concept. It's so important that we don't create a lot of waste. Or historically, we've ran into challenges in food service. So just think of, on a daily basis, we're feeding 40,000 meals, and we may have to have 40,000 apples. It's a little bit different than your normal store. So we have to have resources where we can tap right into that can deliver that level of quantity. And so what's important to us is making sure that we have the partners, the educational partners, to help our kids and to help our specific team. One of the things that we've done directly was implement a system that's called Premier Edge. It's a end-to-end user system which allows us to properly forecast, properly feed, and with minimum waste reduction. And where we have waste, we're partnering with Sustain Dane to help us come up with effective strategies to either donate it to a local agency of some sort and or recycle it. And so I think all of those innovations are going to sustain our entire organization, and it's going to cut down waste from the taxpayers as well.
Excellent, thank you. Delaney and Pio, do you have any particular resources that you've been tapping into?
I would just say learning from our community partners that have been doing work in this realm longer than we have. We have wonderful partners with Rooted and with Feeding the Youth, which is a lovely, also somewhat newer organization, but Jasmine Brown, the founder, is one of our volunteer coordinators, and so she is one of the community connections that we really rely on to help build our community ties with more of our outgoing meal partners. So yeah, relying on those in the community. Reap Food Group has been a lovely partner as well, connecting us. We actually somewhat work with MMSD through REAP. They have their network of local growers who do need that minimal vegetable processing that Little John's then does. So pretty much just not full meals, but for snacks, so chopping up your carrots, making those into little kid-sized bags to deliver as snacks to local schools. So yeah, I would say just learning from our partners, seeing what they've done in the past, what they're looking to do in the future, and what they need support in, and how our efforts can collaborate on that.
Appreciate that. One of the overall values of our clean energy plan for the state of Wisconsin is equity, justice, and collective action. And really, everyone in the room here is part of that collective work, right? And so when we're sitting here talking about sustainability, we can't do this by ourselves. And I appreciate you highlighting the groups that you're working with, because it is really important that we all work together for that momentum. So thank you for that. I again want to shift the conversation over to workforce. I think workforce is a big part of this, and having the capacity to get work done. And specifically, what are the different paths, and what are the different different types of jobs, and how do we get people excited about sustainability and workforce? And I think you have a really great example, Pio, if you want to start and the group talk a bit about workforce and what you're working on to get people motivated to be a part of the movement.
Thank you. We looked at innovating and trying new things, and there's a couple reasons for that. So the basis of our employment structure is that we pay our beer tenders, our frontline employees, the city of Madison's living wage plus revenue sharing. We took out we eliminated the opportunity for tipping traditionally, even though that's such a part of American culture. And the reason for that was that we wanted our staff to work for the mission. As I mentioned early on, our mission is so important to us and the work that we do that, and a lot of my career was spent on the brewery side of restaurants, so I got to watch a lot of restaurant interaction. And you see many staff that work just hard enough to maximize their tip while not necessarily providing the absolute best service they could, or supporting their fellow workers, or working for the business itself, working for yourself. And by eliminating tipping, we created a structure where the only reason to go to work is to support each other and support the mission and welcome our guests, and really just flip the table on the system that we've been chosen to live under. We also decided to charge about $1 more back in the day per pint, so that we could cover the increased wages that we were paying our staff. We feel that service businesses should be charging what it costs to do business, and not relying on their guests to then pay their staff. Because we're working together in community. So if it costs this, charge it, pay your staff, and then and you're working for a common cause. And we found that there's been some hurdles to that, some ups and downs with staff that thought they were into it but necessarily weren't. And what we found is that over time that leveled out. We found people that want to do the work that we have. They want to be there to support the community. They feel that they're being paid justly. And we also found, it was a little bit of a surprise, we knew that people would continue to want to tip. We still see that to this day. And so we just didn't expect that the level would be what it is. We redirect all tips every month to different nonprofit partners, and that's what I was talking about before. Some of our nonprofit partners are Sustain Dane, as well as Little John's. And in that program, Delta Beer Lab and our guests primarily have donated over $155,000 in almost 4 years to organizations that are in our community that fit one of the tenets of our mission, and our staff are doing that work. Our staff are being the weavers to take the message of our nonprofits to our community, and then recycling that money right back into the good works that happen.
Well, over the past 2 years, we've grown extensively. So employment has been a huge part of that as well. Of Little John's as a mission seeks to improve food security locally, and part of how we do that is through trying to employ those who may seek or have barriers to food insecurity or barriers to food security themselves. About a year ago, last fall, I would say, we partnered with the Black Men Coalition of Dane County to start a process of looking to hire on and train folks for our staff who are facing barriers to employment. So that was one of the big steps that we took there. And at that point, we had a $15 an hour starting wage. And then through working with Corey with the Black Men Coalition, bumped that up to $20 an hour because those facing barriers to food security and barriers to employment needed a more realistic wage to make their ends meet. So that was one of the biggest moves that we had made. And training is a huge part of that as well, as making sure that your staff feel like they have a comfortable level of skills to do their job effectively. Also, during the pandemic, being a food service provider and distributor and hiring line and prep cooks as well as drivers, that was one of the hardest areas to hire over the past few years. So we definitely faced a lot of barriers there, but really relied on our community connections to bring people in the doors, to train them. And then from there, if we were reaching out to other community organizations, to make our staff reflective of the communities that we serve, then it kind of just went off there where we no longer needed to outsource our employment and hiring as a new organization. Just having that foundation really just led to our staff kind of bringing in their community and their families and providing opportunities for those folks who either had barriers or were just genuinely interested in the work. We have found a lot of volunteers come through our doors that have made their way into interviews, that have made their way onto staff. Even with our expansion and promotion, we've tried to first have folks apply from within the company to really provide that mobility and that structure and training from within. And then if we didn't have that skill set for a particular need, because we are growing fast, then we would look to our nearest community neighbors to see if they had resources that they wanted to contribute to our mission in our communities.
Yeah, I'll take that as well. So similar to Delaney, I think one of the most important things that we recently did was to try to ensure that we're adequately staffed to serve the needs of our children, of course, in our school district. I want to thank the board and Dr. Jenkins for providing a $5 wage increase. You probably heard a lot about that in the news and why it was so critical for food service operation. Part of it is when you think in terms of 40% of any staff and you don't have, or you're missing 40% of your base labor, it will significantly impact your operation, any operation, to think of it. And so I want to thank the board for passing that. As a direct result of that, we were able to hire close to 47 food service workers within the last month and a half. Now, what's the impact on kids? We now have stable workforce so that now we can begin to train, teach, and develop proper techniques for cooking. We can begin to now focus on scratch cooking, improving all aspects of our food service operation from a logistical standpoint as well as cooking standpoint and from a waste reduction standpoint. And so that was absolutely vital, I think, for us as an entire team. Again, I want to thank the community for their support.
Thank you. A question came in, Theo. What would you tell other local breweries that aren't prioritizing sustainability?
The craft beer community is a really unique for-profit business structure. I've had the ability to work in two industries that are very collaborative. One is youth camping, and one is craft beer. Youth camping, folks just they see the future in the work that they do, and so sharing ideas is everywhere. And in craft beer, there are 9,000 breweries in the country now, and the three biggest beer companies are actually all internationally owned now. None of them are owned by Americans, and they represent the vast majority of liquids sold, well over 75%, and they're gobbling up craft brewers. So all of us little folks work together to make sure that we improve quality, we improve consistency, we focus on community and sustainability. But it's small business is hard, and there's limited resources in everything that we do, and so I think, but most of that in industry is about conversations, about sharing what we do and seeing common areas where we can work together. In Madison here, we have the Mad Bev makers, which is not just beer; it's all the alcoholic producers around here. And we try to work on shared marketing. We talk about innovative ideas that each other are doing, and one of the things we talk about on a small scale is sustainability. And so it's really just like an infancy where we begin to have the conversations now, where we can see that the way to do business differently is to do business better. And so what I would tell other craft brewers is define your mission and then live it every day. Because if your mission is to make as much money as possible, then do that. But make sure it's clear, make sure that your staff know it, and that you're operating every day like that. And if your mission is to work on environmental justice, focus on that and do it. But that's not just true with craft brewers. That's true with every small business. So yeah, it's really just knowing what the road forward is, and then putting your limited resources toward that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That vision and mission statement is so important, and it really drives organizations. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Delaney, question came in for you. Have you been working with hospitals, and are there any other organizations that you have thought about working with but maybe haven't been able to get in with?
Hospitals are definitely on our list of institutions to work with. Not quite yet. We're building out another processing facility. So right now we're just in a temporary facility in Verona. We are building out a 25,000 square foot processing facility with an in-house cafe, but that's mainly for the processing aspect as the majority of the footprint. So once we're in there and have more of the scale to take on a hospital, that it would be when we're looking for those contracts. Right now we're mostly we do a bit more of a food service distribution model. We do have a pay-what-you-can restaurant, but that is, again, in the facility that's being built. So we do that on a more pop-up event style, where we've done it with Rooted this whole summer at Troy Farms, where we would work with them to source what they had either excess of or were harvesting that week, and then we would take those donations, make them into meals, and then at a pop-up pay-what-you-can rate, provide those to community members while they did their CSA distribution. So that is the smaller scale restaurant side that we do, but then we also do currently work with a number of schools, nonprofits, and senior centers. We do the Evening Meals on Wheels program for the county, so that is more the style of distribution we do now versus we do some on-site school contracts as well, but that's down the road for us. We are building up on our scale. We would love to work with some of those larger institutions, though it does, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, with our sourcing model requires a lot more processing capabilities, and those equipment that we have our eyes set on down the road. Our build-out has a number of 300-gallon steam-jacketed kettles that are self-agitating, where we've actually visited the facility itself, and I was able to stand in the skeleton of it, so it's about my height as the width of it. Us being in a temporary banquet hall kitchen, we don't unfortunately have that scale for production yet, so that is what we have our eyes set on down the road, but we would love to provide that kind of service to make sure all of our communities, especially those vulnerable populations in hospitals, in schools, and in senior care facilities, really get the quality food that they both nutritionally and, at our heart, really deserve. Yeah.
Delaney, as a small, newer organization, you talk a lot about scale and
Yes.
The resources it takes to grow up that scale. Have you had contacts with folks in other communities? Because if you're going to work up to the level where you're serving, well, right now you're serving the Meals on Wheels program, and you look toward hospitals or other larger institutions to put rehome your food, essentially.
Yeah.
Have other communities reached out to do similar models, even though you're only 2 years old, to do these kind of works in other communities?
Definitely, I would say that we're also not the first necessarily. The Pay What You Can model was actually based off of One World Everybody Eats. So Chef Dave Heidi, as he was in the visionary stages of imagining what Little John's could be, did a national tour of all of the different Pay What You Can cafes across the country. Those are all nonprofit based as well. So there's about 50 right now. So we have been modeling our model off of theirs, and so we've definitely had some folks reach out to us to pick our brains, but we're by no means the only people in this realm. Trickle Bee Cafe in Milwaukee is actually the only Pay What You Can restaurant besides us now in the state of Wisconsin. So we've been trying to go off of other models as well. But most of those are more restaurant cafe style versus what we're gearing towards is, like you mentioned, the efficiencies. So that's us trying to create more of a hybrid model of we're not just the restaurant and we're not just a processing facility, but then looking to others in the field and hoping to also inspire others in the field to do similar models. It's just the infrastructure and financial leap that we have to make from doing what we're at now. At our peak this year, we were doing about 17,000 meals a week. Now we're just doing around 7,000. That has to do with a lot of seasonal variation as well. So now we're in the fall, we're doing less school or summer programming. We also were doing some COVID respite meals, and so those numbers are thankfully down lower for a good reason. But yeah, we've just been looking at other models and trying to collaborate with other local processors or producers in need of processing. So the Wisconsin Food Hub Co-op, also Sarah Lloyd there, who's at UW-Madison in the Center for Integrated Ag Systems, looking to their research and their models that they've been exploring for how to do local food processing. This lovely food community that we're in and these producers have known that they've needed this for a long time. It's just making that leap and seeing others who have done the same is really where we're at right now, is getting to that processing goal.
Great. Thank you so much. Cedric, you got a kudo here for thanks for listening to many people and orgs and supporting food service worker pay increases. So I thought I'd share that. But an additional question, what does MMSD need for infrastructure upgrades to serve healthier meals and more local ingredients?
Yeah, first of all, again, thank you, community, as well. When you think of in terms of the wage itself, I'll pause here for a second, but a livable wage is sustainability for an ecosystem. $15.96 entry wage for food service workers, and a lot of them may work 4 hours to 6 hours. Is simply not sustainable. And so bringing them up to $20, $21 an hour, I think will make a huge difference in the pockets of their families, single mothers, et cetera. When you look in terms of the needed upgrades to begin to move the food forward process, I think we have to take 3 holistic looks at. One, are we equipped to actually service high quality content food in our schools? A lot of our schools are what are called city schools. They were built in the 30s and 40s. They're simply not equipped to handle high volume electrical output, kitchens, et cetera, small. A lot of our schools, when they were built, kids walked home for lunch, and now that has changed. And so when we look at the infrastructure needed, we're doing a feasibility study with a couple contractors that's gonna give us a dollar amount attached to what it would take to upgrade all of our facilities. That will be inclusive of having proper stoves, ovens, steamers, plumbing, electricity, air conditioning, vent hoods, et cetera. And so certainly a huge lift. We're starting the process now by upgrading the high school kitchens as well. And then we're gonna slowly work our way down to middles and particularly elementary schools. The beautiful thing about this here in our close is we do have a really good, what I call stable production kitchen. We begin to get the high volume auto shams, blast chillers, for those who may be speaking restaurant lingo, but make a long story short, auto sham will allow us to cook 2,000 pieces of chicken in 20 minutes. It's a little bit different. It's a game changer when you only have from 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock before your difference between your breakfast and lunch. And so all of the equipment, I think, is necessary. Then you have to also think in terms of, do we have the refrigeration and freezer storage to actually hold, cook, and serve properly as well. And so all of these things we're studying together. We're gonna come back, I think, in February to the board and begin to lay out the beginning stages of what schools we think will need the upgrades the most. And we're gonna begin to go at, this is very serious on Dr. Jenkins' a list of things. There's a direct correlation between proper food, adequate hydration, adequate diet, and learning. And I can also make the case that when you are not getting that, there's also a direct correlation between test scores and in some of the areas in which we struggled in the district from a Title I experience and low test scores. So we're excited about the opportunity. We know Madison is on the cusp of change, and I think we have the team and the community support to get that done.
Thank you. I'm going to stay with you, Cedric. So let's talk about transportation. So just for everyone's knowledge, here in the state of Wisconsin, 26% of our emissions come from transportation, our greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's a lot of talk about electrification. We got to hear about Wisconsin being a little leader, and you know, not only from our fleets deploying a lot of electric vehicles and biodiesel and different alternative fuels. Can you talk a bit about what the school district is looking at as far as electrification of transportation and transport of students?
Yeah, really three major points on that. Number one, internally, as we begin to go in the future, we've installed 6 electrical stations at our new high schools as part of the referendum. And I think that's critical so that a lot of our high school students will be driving soon. They'll have access to those electrical stations. We've upgraded our fleet at MMSD. We went from, I think, 2 vehicles to 19. They're electrical vehicles. And so we're slowly making the progress of transitioning our fleet over to electric. In regards to the busing, we have an outsourced company called Badger. And we're working with Badger. We actually have an RFP out currently right now that's in the process of being bidded out. And part of the demands that we put in there is that they reach a electrical goal by a certain date as well. And so we know there's cost attached to it, and so we're working with our local providers. We're working with our actually Sustained Dane, who supported us in actually getting a grant for electrical buses as well that we were awarded. And so these are some small steps I think we're making toward getting there. We're certainly not there yet, but I do believe that we're starting.
Thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes or so, a little bit over 10 minutes. I want to take this opportunity to ask you all a couple of questions. And so the first one is, what is your vision for the impact of your work in 5 years, between now and the next 5 years?
For us, it's a continuation of what we set out to do, but just doing it more consistently. It is, we know that community, that craft beer has, or beer in general, has brought people together for thousands of years. We know that from fossilized records all the way through written history. And our goal at Delta is to reconnect with those nonprofits, reconnect with our community, and build community and committee, because we're a pretty small team and we can't do everything that we want to do by ourselves. And so we want to bring voices together so that we can assign work, so that we can take advantage of the skill sets we talked about this morning, so that we can be an effective group to maximize our good. And so it's really about developing the human resources, whether they're paid, volunteer, or partnered organization, to put the right skill set at the table and work together to do everything that we can.
I'd pretty much go off of that, of not just building community partnerships, but continuing to support them and also continuing to refine what we're already doing. Clearly, in the next 5 years, Little John's hopes to have our processing facility open. That's more of an infrastructure goal. But just in the realm of food distribution, we've worked with a lot of nonprofits and a lot of producers, and really there is kind of a competitive resource distribution network that we really are trying to gear towards being more collaborative. There's plenty of room for everyone who's in this network to work together rather than against each other. We even just have product that, you know, I can't use, but you can. How do I connect you to this resource? Where Second Harvest has been wonderful with that, where we're not direct partners with them as a food bank to food pantry relationship, but they get a lot of distributors who come through Wisconsin they gave me a call a few months ago. There was a semi coming through with just romaine lettuce, just a semi full of romaine lettuce that they were not able to get out to their pantries in time. But we also knew that we couldn't use the whole semi, so we took a portion and then passed that connection down the line, where they had Hook's Cheese, who is a lovely producer who I know many of you might love, made 2 pallets worth of cheese for Second Harvest, but they were in 140-pound blocks that you can't just give to a family to cook up for mac and cheese that night. So unfortunately, they had to turn it down, but they knew that we could make meals with it. So really just trying to collaborate more and communicate more, where a lot of the networking that's done in this realm has traditionally been over, phone trees and email chains, where working with perishable goods, sometimes that connection doesn't happen fast enough before the product is lost. So really just to not just continue building bridges, but to fortify them and reevaluate how our communication strategies could be improved, whether that's just through, exploring software possibilities that could do that networking. There's a million apps out there that try to connect people to local resources, but making sure everyone's on the same page of what we do want to use, how we can communicate, and what resources we do want to collaborate on versus which ones that we do want to pass on to our nearest neighbor who could likely use it better than us, and just being upfront and honest with what we have and what we need. And I think even was mentioned a lot as a theme in our keynote presentation was just not being afraid to ask for help and knowing how to ask for help and who, and connecting those resources. So really communicating with our community as effectively as we can and in a collaborative way versus calling dibs on product here and there, when often that happens. And this is where food excess leads to food waste. Is I have a scarcity mindset. I have people to feed in my community who are hungry, but we don't really have the capacity to do this. It was an all or nothing, and it wasn't a collaboration all or nothing where, okay, I can take a little bit here, you can use the rest. It's more of, I know I can't get the next thing, so I will take this, and I know that this means that you will not be able to receive anything. So being more collaborative as a county, really, in food redistribution, but a lot of that is not for any intention either way. It's just making sure people have pathways for communication and awareness of what's already happening in the community versus just siloing and keeping your head down to do the work that you can to help your own community versus realizing that we're all in this work together.
Yeah, so Fareed's great. This is a great question. I wrote something down, and I'll take opportunity just to read it. But for us, as I think about what we could do better, it's really impacting the 6 dimensions of quality of life, particularly for students and families. I wrote those down, and I'll just go over them for just a second. First thing that we can do to impact quality of life is physical environment. Everything that surrounds you should be there to support your physical growth. The next one is health and well-being, promoting a healthy lifestyle through nutritious meals and a well-balanced diet. And if you think about these as each individual, in particular as a student, as I go down the list, if we can hit these 6 things in the school districts, I think we would have done our job. The next one is social interaction. It encompasses all factors that strengthen bonds amongst individuals and facilitates access to various cultures. The next one, recognition. Everybody wants to be recognized for the good that they do, and they want to be embraced. The next is ease and efficiency. All factors that impact upon an individual's ability to carry out activities smoothly with minimum interruptions. And I think that one was critical, particularly when it comes to kids. There's been so many disruptions and interruptions in their social and emotional learning. It has wreaked havoc on some of our children. Think in terms of missing 2 or 3 years of interacting with your friends, you lose some connectivity. And so they're focused now on trying to reestablish what that connectivity looked like. And this might be the new norm. We really don't know. But at the end of the day, ease and efficiency has got to be one of the top things that we can do for our kids in helping them learn. And then the last piece for me was really personal growth. And that's every human being and kid should have the ability to work free of fear, the ability to try to achieve what they envision in their mind, and they should have the wraparound support to do that. And I think that's one of our key focus with Dr. Jenkins and the administration is we're trying to find every avenue by which our kids can grow, thrive, and learn in a nourishing environment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So what is your call to action for the folks in the audience? And we're here because we want to see social change, and we want to have sustainability in our daily lives. And you're doing good and not just doing well, right? And as a priority. What's your call to action for the folks in this room?
Well, I think certainly for us, I really enjoy collaborative engagement. We have some we have some incredibly intelligent folks here in Madison, and we really can do this together. I would genuinely like to see a thought partnership. Critique everything. Find collaborative approaches to resolving issues. It's just not about, fixing something. We were talking about this earlier. What is the process by which we can not only fix it, but sustain it? It's very critical to just, attack something or be on a bandwagon. But rarely do we find individuals who want to engage in finding solutions together. And I think from my vantage point, I would love to see this community here kind of help us spearhead some of these initiatives, going green, the importance of it. Having a community wraparound support that when we bring things to the board, it's not just about educating internally, it's educating externally as well. Resources are strained, we know that. But I do believe that what we focus on and what we put our priorities to will make or break us here in Madison.
I would say call to action would be, especially first step is done here, but get involved and get aware, especially when it comes to food system sustainability. I think Aldo Leopold, very much paraphrasing, but one of his self-identified dangers of not owning a farm was that you think that all of your food comes from the grocery store and that your heat comes from the furnace, where the more detached you are from where especially your food comes from, the less mind that you have of ecosystems and agro-ecosystem sustainability, where the first step could just be learning more about the work that's done by Sustain Dane and by other organizations in your county, in your city, and seeing what great work is already being done and how you can just get involved in that and not feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. I feel like these days, from the pandemic to climate change, there's all these massive issues, especially in the field of sustainability, that seem so complicated and so burdensome, but there's no one person's issue to solve, and there's plenty of amazing work that's already going on, where just finding a way to educate yourself of what's already happening, starting a home compost, cooking more at home, going to the grocery store, or just to a farmer's market and talking to that farmer and getting that connection and getting involved and feeling like you have some input into the systems that you find yourself in.
The last few years have been really hard, but the risk to do something innovative is far less than the risk of inaction.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you for your time and all of your efforts, and the work that you're doing is so important, and I hope that the room feels inspired to ask more questions. I would have to say on my text I got over 30 questions, so there's no possible way in the time that we had to be able to answer them all, but they were all really great questions. So I would encourage you, if you did submit a question and we didn't get to it, please text over your email or any contact information so that we can follow up with you afterwards and get the questions over to the panelists. But I want to thank Sustain Dane for the opportunity to highlight your work and highlight our leaders, and keep up the great work. We got this. We're going to keep that momentum up, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, big thank you again to our speakers and moderator. Thank you for your innovation, your collaboration, and to echo Delaney, I hope you take this time to fortify the bridges that you're making. As you enjoy lunch, we will come back here at 1:30. Thanks, everyone.